Welcome, everyone. My name is Grant Walker, and I'm here with my sister, Jenelle and Schmidt, and this is an evening in the Stormcave. This is episode 1. Jenelle, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited to be kicking off this first episode. This is a dream that's been a while in the making. Thanks for joining us, all of you, in our little corner of the internet where stories live and breathe and family memories are cherished.
Yeah, so this is kind of like chapter 1, our first episode, the beginning of a book, and we thought we would start by sharing a little bit of our own story, where we come from, why it is that we fell in love with the idea of storytelling, and how our family growing up really shaped who we are and what it is that we are doing today.
Yeah. And this first episode is, like you said, all about family. And what better place to start than our own, right? I don't know about you, Grant, but when I think about our family, the memories that really come to the forefront of my mind are just the stories that we shared. We had family night, movie night every Friday night. We would often have our dad reading to us or making up his own stories around bedtime.
And it wasn't just any stories, they were adventures that we went on together as a family. It was just the magic of being together, dad's voice, the way he would read. It was a safe place to be. I remember specifically, and this is kind of where the name originated from, living in the Midwest, Tornado Alley. There was a number of times where we would have to hunker down in a closet in the middle of the house because of a tornado warning or a massive thunderstorm outside, and didn't feel any fear at all in that room as we sat there with flashlights and listening to dad either read or tell stories. It was just a wonderful place to be.
Yep, it was our own little storm cave. And I know that you have often talked about remembering just drinking Pepsi out of glass bottles. That was like a core memory, right? Of
Yeah.
those times just being is like, yeah, it wasn't scary. It was like, hey, we've got stories and we've got glass bottles full of Pepsi, and that was all you really needed. And then our parents and their voices and just the stories that they would tell.
It was the Chronicles of Narnia, the Lord of the Rings, the Chronicles of Friday, like just these wonderful adventures where we got to go along on uh, these adventures with these characters that we came to love. And I would think that it's safe to say that that is where we both caught the bug for storytelling for sure.
Oh yeah, that's definitely where my love of reading and writing comes from. Just watching how stories could take on a life of their own, not just on a page, but how they brought our family together. I know our dad also often talks about how listening to all these same stories, listening to watching all the same movies, listening to all the same music. It's almost like we grew up with a shared soul, and I love that picture, right, as such a storytelling thing. And I want to create stories that families can read together and experience together just like we did. So that's what I want to do with my writing always.
And the exact same for me, maybe just in a little bit of a different way. It's funny. I had a date night with Angelina, my wife, here just a couple weeks ago where we painted each other. And my wife is an artist, and so she paints very well, and I do not. So the tool I like to use for telling stories is my camera, simply because a pen or a brush, I don't render as flattering an image. But I do. I love the idea of telling stories visually with my camera, and there's so many fantastic stories that still need to be told. Capturing the visual side of a story, capturing the feel of a story. At the heart of it, though, it's stories that connect people. I've always thought and believed that there's probably not a book or a movie out there that you love where you don't love the characters. I think it's so important to be able to connect with, to understand, to relate to the characters, to really fall in love with them, and then by the same token, to fall in love with that story.
And when you have that relationship with those characters, right, even though it's very one-sided, right, but when you experience that with your family or with other people, um, it is a social experience, right? I always joke with people that we it was never an antisocial thing watching movies. I've had friends throughout the years who are like, oh, I don't want to watch a movie, I want to do something together. And I'm like, what do you think watching a movie is? But that's how we grew up, right? We wouldn't just watch the movie and turn our brains off. That was never something that we even considered doing, because after the movie we talked about it. We talked about the characters and our favorite lines and our favorite parts and our least favorite parts, and we'd discuss if there were plot holes or why didn't they just do such and such, right? And so it was almost an Olympic event. And I'll tell people that I'm like, watching movies in my family was an Olympic event, and we just quoted things all the time and we'd talk for hours. I mean, I know we would go out to watch a movie at like 6 o'clock at night. So, the movies are an hour and a half, 2 hours long. You get done, and we would go out for pizza afterwards or Chili's, and we would just talk about the movie for at least an hour. And I just recently had a conversation with a friend where I was telling her about this, and she just gave me this look and she goes, I don't think I've ever talked about a movie for an hour. And it was very much like, oh, why are you so weird type of look that I got. But that was just what we did. And it wasn't like expected. It wasn't like our parents were like, you will talk about these movies. It just, that's what we did. And it was fun. And we all participated. And
Yeah, absolutely, whether it was books or movies, and I think the movies that you love, the books that you love, you can always go back to, and it's always fun to share your excitement over certain little details and things that you may have noticed, and to also hear someone else's perspective. I remember specifically coming back from watching The Two Towers the first time, and it would be in a very, animated debate because after the first time we watched it, there was a number of us who weren't as enamored the first time as we had been with The Fellowship of the Ring, and I remember being just so, like, I wanted to defend this movie because it was my favorite movie of all time. Um, then we watched it 11 more times, and everybody came around. Um, but yeah, it was just this shared experience, which even outside of our family, one of the great things about going to the movies or watching movies with friends is it becomes this shared experience. You go on the adventure with the characters in the movie, but also with whoever you're watching it with, which is an amazing thing about movie theaters. There's a director, can't think who it is, but he talks about that, where the amazing thing about going to the movie theater is you go on this adventure with 200 other strangers and you have the same experience or you experience the same things. And you may leave there and never see each other again, but you all have that shared experience, which is why so many people remember, going to premieres or the first, time seeing a movie. And it's something that you can share with people, which I do think we do when we get together as a family. For anybody who's not on the same page as us, we can communicate and have entire dialogues through movie quotes because just like memes, we can use a movie quote to use less words and give a much broader meaning that the person understands completely or it goes completely over their head. And there's a lot of times where I tell people, like, I might throw a movie quote out in just a conversation with somebody that's not either, a stranger or somebody new to me. And if they get it, it's almost like, oh, we're going to get along just fine. And if they don't, it's like, well, maybe we need to reconsider this friendship. Not really. Not really.
not really, not really. Maybe you just need to introduce them to that movie.
Exactly, which is awesome and a wonderful opportunity as well.
Or if you're me, they just get used to the fact that everything that comes out of my mouth is a quote, and I am used to the fact that they don't get any of them.
That's right. It can work out to your benefit. Like, very often, my wife will think that I have said something extremely clever, and I don't always correct her and let her know that I'm just quoting a movie. Um, and it may have been a movie that we saw just the day before. Um, but that is wonderful. And it's one of the things, like, I love when it comes to movies or books, like with my wife or with my kids. It is a wonderful thing when you have something that you love that you've watched many times, read many times. Like the first time I get to watch it with my kids, it's like getting to see it again for the first time. It's kind of like Christmas, by the time you become an adult, uh, for some, the magic starts to fade a little bit. And then when your kids start to experience it, it just brings it all back. It's just that whole idea of sharing this with someone that you love. It's an awesome thing. So yes, I love getting to watch old favorite movies or reading old favorite books with someone else for the first time and getting to see their reaction. Just getting to think, oh man, I wish I could watch this again for the first time.
I've started changing my response when people haven't seen something, even if it's something where it's like, hey, that's been out for like 100 years. Where have you been? Right. But instead of, because I feel like a lot of times we go, oh, you haven't seen that? Like, how is that possible? And I've started going, yes. You have this super exciting experience before you still, and that's kind of fun because it gets them excited about it too. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
watching stuff with our kids, we're watching the Marvel Universe movies with our kids, and we're not quite through all of them, but we just finished Endgame, and it's been interesting because a lot of these movies I only saw once, and I only saw them in the theater. And it's been interesting watching them through my kids' eyes, getting to watch them and experience them with my kids, like one movie after another in a much faster at a much faster pace than we got to watch them because we had to wait, for years sometimes between movies. And it's interesting watching them through their eyes how some of these movies that I loved in the theater, I'm kind of like, what did I see in that? And then there are other ones where I know I came away from the theater going, I hated that. And then my kids are like, this is so fun. And I'm hearing them laugh at places and going, oh, actually, I was just the wrong audience, or I was with the wrong audience. And so it's just a fun thing because when you get to experience something for the first time again with somebody, uh, you maybe notice things that you didn't notice the first time. And
The shared experience side of it can totally change the way you watch a movie. Oh, this weekend, the boys and me were home, and the girls were all out at the basketball tournament, and so I said, "Okay, boys, you guys get to pick the movie," and they wanted to watch Godzilla, and I was like, "Oh, let's watch something new," and they said, "No," they wanted to watch Godzilla because they would never get to with their sister around, so we did. We put in Godzilla X Kong into the Spider-Verse or something, and let me tell you, the the dumbest movie maybe ever made, but watching it with my boys made it so fun because, they're 9 and 11 and just absolutely find it to be amazing. So, we were sitting in a circle at Luca's basketball game, my youngest, and the coach went around and said, "Hey, everybody share what your favorite movie is." And they went around the group, and I don't know if it was peer pressure or if they genuinely feel this way, but every single one of them said their favorite movie of all time was Sonic 3. And I found Sonic 3 to be entertaining, but if you think that that is the best movie that's ever been made, then you really need to expand your horizons a little bit. It's a little bit like my son thinking that hot dogs are the best meal that could ever be had. So, your taste kind of makes sense, but all that to say, the shared experience side of it makes such a huge difference in, your enjoyment and what you take away from it. And I think what I love one of the things I love is, with my family, 4 kids, 3 that are able to understand the movies that we're watching. They all have different personalities. They all like different things in life, but we have this shared love of stories, and it's a building and a growing love, whether it's us reading at night or watching movies together. It's something that we do. We experience together as a family. And I do think that the purpose, um, why we're here, the idea behind Stormcave is we wanna share that love of stories with other families, with other people, with other friends, and we want them to share their love of stories with us because there's so many out there. I've talked with you many times about going to a bookstore and looking at every single one of the illustrated children's books and be like, "Man, there's just nothing here in this big box store," but I know there's wonderful, beautiful, lovely stories out there, and we wanna share the ones that we found, and we want you to share the ones that you have with us because we're always, always looking for more stories that we can share together as families, as friends, as, brother and sister.
Yeah. And I know that there are way more stories out there than I could ever possibly read in a lifetime, but the good ones, right? The ones that bring you together, the ones that stay with you forever and ever. Like those are the stories that I want to find more of them. And hopefully we can share, like you said, we can share some of those with people, right? Who tune in. Hopefully they will share their favorites with us. There will probably be some overlap, but I think, we'll probably all find something new. And it's interesting, like just this whole idea of the togetherness, the family experience, the shared experience of watching a movie, or reading a story or listening to music or listening to a podcast or an audiobook and just getting that adventure, right? going on that adventure together. And I love that. I hope that we can provide that for people here, with just what we're talking about and some of the recommendations that we make, because our culture has really gotten very lonely. And it's crazy because like you and I can stand here 16 to 2000 1600 2000 miles apart, right, and have this podcast, have this conversation. It looks like we're in the same, well, it doesn't look like we're in the exact same room, but it looks like we're having this conversation in person. And yet this idea of togetherness has drifted away. Has Families don't spend as much time around the table, they don't spend as much time in the living room together. And I think stories can fix that if we come back to gathering together and sharing these experiences together. And sometimes you have to make some compromises, right? Sometimes you go, hey, I've got a 16-year-old and I have a 7-year-old. So sometimes we have to watch movies that the 7-year-old can handle, and like Sonic 3. And sometimes we can watch movies that the 16-year-old is more interested in, like Emma. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's right. I always joke that there's certain stories that you want to share with your kids, but you have to wait until you know, it becomes age appropriate. And I know we joked about this in our family with our siblings, but now with my kids, I always say, my oldest daughter, she grew up with Daniel Tiger. And then my second son grew up with PJ Masks. And then my third son grew up with Jurassic Park because we just couldn't wait any longer. Not really. But it is, it's storytelling not only connects us, but it connects to so many other parts of our lives. Like your life is a story. And I think that's some of the things that we'll be talking about is how storytelling connects to family, to our personal lives, to our faith. Look at the Bible. One of the things that Jesus does when he comes down is he explains the unexplainable through stories that people in that time could relate to, because that was the power of the story. It had a way of communicating these huge, massive, incomprehensible truths in a simple way that was very powerful. And that is the power, to me, of a story. A great story. My favorite stories are subtle. I've told you this many times, Chanel, but I not hate, because there's nothing wrong with them. But
loathe entirely.
Loathe entirely. The books that have an agenda, and I'm not talking about like a political, I'm just talking about like an ABC book that teaches you the ABCs. You got to learn the ABCs. That's great. Rudy Beaver learns how to be polite. Those are good things. But what I think is more powerful and what I love is when you have a story that is just a beautiful story and the lessons are in there, but you discover them on your own. And we want to talk about those kind of stories. Those are the kind of stories that we want to discover. Those are the kind of stories that we want to be a part of. Those are the kind of stories we want to live. And those are the kind of stories that we want to create and share with you, the audience.
Yeah. And so I think that's kind of a good segue into what we're hoping to do with this podcast, right? We want to talk about our favorite stories, whether they're movies, whether they're books, whether they're true life adventures that we've actually had, because I'm not as entertaining out loud as you are. I tend to write, but you have some great stories about your life. And I would love to sometimes it's like we feel really bad for you that they happen to you, but you're very entertaining about it. But I think it's good to share some of those adventures. And I love like when you post, I love the videos that you post of you and your kids going on hikes, right? And then you add on your own little witty commentary about the fact that all three of them have gone off to climb different cliffs and you can only be in one place at one time. So, which one are you going to catch? That sort of thing. But I just think that, we're gonna try to share stories. Blah, blah, blah. That was fun. Share stories. That's not supposed to be a tongue twister. But yeah, and also just maybe have some guests on. We know a lot of other storytellers and they've got great stories too. The singers, songwriters, other filmmakers, other authors, artists. I think we hopefully can have some fun special guests along the way.
And as I was thinking through this last night, what Stormcave means to me, and I could literally write a book, not a very good one, but write a book on what the idea of Stormcave is to me. But I came across a passage in a series that I read with my kids a little while ago, and I just want to read a section of it um, because it just perfectly captures the power and the beauty and the importance of taking in stories, sharing stories with our children, and then watching them go out and live their own stories. Um, it's from the Green Ember series. I don't know, Janelle, if you've read this or not. We actually were gifted this series by some really dear friends. And it was funny, we started reading this right after finishing the Wing Feather saga, which, Janelle, you gave to us. And it was funny because the first book we started reading, and I just couldn't really get into it because the characters weren't Kalmar, Janner, or Lily. Uh, it wasn't Uncle Arthur. It was a new story, and it took a while for me to leave the Wingfeather saga behind because it was such a powerful experience going through those books. But by the time we got into book 2 and 3, just absolutely fell in love with this series. So this is a scene out of book 3. I'm not going to really give it any context because I don't think for what my purpose in reading it is necessary. But if it's okay with you, I'm just going to read this little segment. Heather told Mother and Father everything. From the moment she and Pickett came back from picking berries to find their Nick Hollow home on fire and their family captured, to the moment she woke up in their Accolon home. Everything. With no hesitation, she shared the bitter disappointments and the wild, exultant triumphs. She told of Pickett, amazing them at how he grew from a bitter, resentful cripple to a high-flying hero, willing to sacrifice all for the cause. She told of her own low moments, the bad dreams and the real-life terrors. She shared the joys of her friendship with Smalls and with Emma, the best friends she had ever known outside of her family. She wept as she talked of Smalls and smiled when she told how Pickett really flew, and rescued Emma and her at Cloud Mountain. She told them everything. Somehow I have become the scribe of the cause, she finished, and Pickett is something like his talismanic hero. The world as we knew it was shattered, and we never knew what we might be forced to find within ourselves. In the tumult and the trials, we found our callings, and we have done some good. Thank you for loving us, Mother and Father. Thank you for preparing us for the unnumbered dangers we faced. We had no idea that when you gave us all the light you did, you were guiding us to one day strike out at the darkness so fiercely. We have been far from flawless, but we have made a hard dart at that darkness. We have seen cracks forming and the light seeping in. She took a deep breath, let it out slowly, then leaned back in her chair. Mother and Father gazed on at her, mouths open, expressions caught between wonder and unbelief. Tears fell down the fur of their faces, but they didn't look at all sad. They eyed one another and shook their heads slowly. I am astonished, Father said softly. I am amazed at what you say, my dear, and how well you say it. Yes, Heather, Mother added slowly and hushed. You're as eloquent as any I've ever heard. It's beautiful to hear you unravel this tale, but tell me, dear, is it really true? Oh, it's too good to not be true, Mother. Heather felt exhausted from her long story, but satisfied, as well as from a hard day of healing when the sick were clearly mending. You are well called the scribe of the cause, Father said. To my great joy, my love, you have surpassed me. It's true, Mother added. Pickett has flown, Heather, but so have you. Since last we saw you, a timid young doe, you have ascended. And maybe to someone who hasn't read books 1 or 2 yet, that may not have a lot of power and meaning, but when you understand the story, to me, it's just so powerful. And I love that idea that these parents poured light into their children, spent time with them, told them tales of courage and bravery and boldness. And that inspired these children that when they go out into the world, it is hard and dark and scary sometimes, that they want those same traits to be true in their lives. And I want that for my life. And I want to be that kind of person. I want to live that way. And then I want to pour that into my children so that they can live that way. I think that's the power of storytelling. I think that's the power of sharing stories. So whether you're snuggling up with your whole family or just tuning in solo, we hope that you'll come back for more because, like our dad always said, every night, every night was a chance to go on a new adventure. Um, that's the great thing about stories.
Yeah. And the best ones are too good to not be true. I was thinking about the great Samwise quote, right? Like it's like in the great tales, Mr. Frodo, right? The ones where you didn't know how it was all going to end, right? And just that's that's why we tell stories. That's why I write, right? I don't necessarily write true stories. I write make believe stories. I write fantasy. I write adventure, but hopefully they shine a light to the people reading them so that they have that courage, that secondhand courage from those characters and go, oh man, if Frodo could walk across Mordor, or if Sam could carry him, then I can keep going when facing a job I hate, or a boss who doesn't like me, or a chronic illness, or right, these are the dragons that we fight in real life, and we do fight dragons in real life. Everybody has a dragon that they're fighting in real life. And so kind of like I'm gonna butcher the quote because I can't remember who said it. I think it might be G.K. Chesterton who said, right, that don't teach dragon, what is it,
I know
fairy
the
tales
quote.
exist not to teach children that there are dragons, but to teach them that dragons can be defeated.
Yeah. That's,
I don't know if that's
like,
G.K. Chesterton or if that's C.S. Lewis.
I'm sure he wouldn't
I get
mind.
them. He probably, neither one of them would mind it being attributed to them, but
Yeah. Well, when you talk about you writing fantasy, I'm in the middle of book 3 of the Turum Archive that you wrote right now. And we've talked about this before. I don't know if we have in this format, but when it's done right, when it's done the way you have done it, I don't see the way you write fantasy as an escape from reality, but more of an escape to what reality could be. Because yes, the world and the elements are all fantastical, but the friendships, the courage, the standing up for what is right, the the questions, the moral dilemmas, the relationships, they're all real. They all could be. We could all be those kind of friends. We could all choose courage over the easy way in our lives. And absolutely, I've had even just recently decisions in my life where I've thought, man, even from a biblical perspective, like I don't want to make decisions based off of fear. And a lot of times my action or inaction is based off of fear of not being enough, fear of failure. Um, and I don't want to go through life that way. I don't want my life story to be marked by those things. And so it's not easy. It's not easy because it takes a conscious choice. But I do rely on those stories. I rely on all of those traits and disciplines that were poured into us, even though we didn't know that's what was happening. All of the light that mom and dad poured into us as children, I now want to share with my children. I want to share with you and your families. And I want you to share your light with us because we live in a world where we need as much light as we can possibly get.
oh yeah, for sure. And I think something that is also great about stories, I was just thinking about this as you were talking, is that they change you, right? Like you don't read a story, and I mean, I guess you can, right? You can sit and watch a movie and just walk away and be like, oh, that was fun. But I think the best stories change you. They leave bits of themselves in your story, right? And you come away with some of that extra courage, or with oh, that's the kind of friend I want to be, or that's the kind of friend I want to find, or I want to have this hope, and I want to have this strength, or I don't want to be afraid of different things anymore. And so it's it always comes back to the things that I love, right, for me. And so it was fun when I was recently like revamping my author brand. I was trying to come up with a tagline, and I decided to steal one from somebody else. but not another author. So, and I don't even think it's actually a true story, but it doesn't matter to me that it's not a true story, because one of my childhood heroes was Ernest Shackleton, right? And Grant, you know this, right? The adventures he went on, and the fact that he brought all of his men safely home, right? And just how he was like, we're gonna go on this voyage, and there was this whole thing about him putting an ad in the paper, basically saying this is going to be an awful trip and we don't know if anybody's going to come back, right? And so the myth that has grown up is that the ad said safe return doubtful, and then the next day there was a line around a mile long, just of people wanting to go on this adventure, wanting to follow this man. And I think that's true of the best stories, right? It's safe return doubtful. You're not going to come home unchanged. You're not going to walk away from this story unchanged. So be aware of that. But that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Hopefully it's a good thing. And so yeah, so as we share these stories, we are gonna obviously always make sure that we're trying to share things that you can watch with your families and know that they're safe to watch with your family. But that doesn't mean that they won't change you, and that you won't suddenly have children who want to reenact the Battle of the Rohirrim. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that just goes to one of, many people's favorite quotes from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when, I don't know if it's Lucy or Susan, is asking, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver asking, is Aslan safe? She's like, no, of course he's not safe. He's a lion, but he's good. And some of the best stories are like that. They're not safe. I remember, it's funny. I got a book for, Wyatt, my second oldest, my son, when he was young. It was one of those books that it's kind of like those movies. I don't know if you ever go in to see a movie with zero expectations or you don't know anything about it and you're just blown away. And those are really fun experiences. And I got this book. It's called Lionheart. And I was reading this to him. I just literally, the first time I read it with him. And he was probably 4 or 5 at the time, and I'm opening it up, and it's about this young boy named Richard who, within the first couple pages, he's being hunted by this dragon. And I remember thinking, man, this book is not safe. It is awesome. I mean, it was beautiful, and the lesson was there about courage and bravery, but it was very subtle, and the pictures were a little terrifying. But it was awesome, and he loved it. And so I would say it was really good, but it was not safe. There's a lot of hardship in life, but that's where growth comes from. And I try to embrace that, like in my own story. It's like, well, we just really want everything to go well. We used to say this in baseball all the time. It's like, baseball's supposed to be fun. Well, hitting doubles in the gap is fun. Striking out is not fun. And that's, true of life. But where do you grow? I've learned far more from baseball. I've learned far more from life, far more from stories, from the hardships, from the failures, from the obstacles, from the trials, from the challenges. And that's true of life. And so I've tried, even recently, I've had a few moments where it's easy to look back and say, oh yeah, I can see how that was a great thing. But in the moment, it is difficult. And I've tried that recently. Like, okay, here's a difficult moment. Like, this is an opportunity to grow. I wouldn't say that I always handle that very well. And like you were saying earlier, a lot of my stories that people enjoy, I think they enjoy them because it makes them feel better about their lives.
They're just glad it didn't happen to them.
Yeah. Yes. And so if I can bring small joys to people in that way, then by all means.
I was actually mostly thinking about some of your hunting trip expeditions that are actual, like, wow, people get to do that in real life. You don't have to tell us where you go, because I know you like keeping that a secret. But in one of these podcasts, we should have you just tell us about going hunting with Hawkins.
Yeah. I think I wrote that one time, something like, the hidden places of the world should remain secret for the adventurous soul. The fact or the knowledge that such places still exist should suffice and are out there to be discovered. Just like these great stories. Every Christmas, I'm looking for the next great story that I can share with my family. And I don't know if my kids are always super pumped to open the book that I've picked out for them. And not every story is successful. We joke about all the time. Everybody knows Blockbuster Video. but the one that was closest to us was video images, and Dad would spend hours, seemed like, every Friday going through, and it's like, looking back, I was like, "Dad, like, it's all the same movies, like, the only thing that may have changed is the 2 or 3 new releases that might have gotten added over in the new release section." But you have to sift through so much to find those treasures, but they are out there. Um, and I by no means think we've discovered all of them, which is exciting. I hope we have not. Uh, yeah, and so that's part of it, like, we want this to be a community. We want this to be something where you are sharing your favorite stories with us that we can go and read and experience. Like you said, we won't be able to read or watch or see everything, um, and certainly we don't think that our opinions are better than anybody's, but they are ours, and so we're gonna share the things that we love, and hope that in sharing them with you, you will discover something new, that you love, or maybe just get to relive and go back through some of the things that we all love together, because I just think that'd be a lot of fun.
For sure. So I think that's a really nice place to end. So thanks for joining us for our very first episode of An Evening in the Storm Cave. And we can't wait to keep telling stories with you.
We'll see you next time, and we'll go on another adventure together, and until then, happy reading, listening, and telling.